example.
Should we start with what consciousness is first before we get to love?
I mean,
I just got done with Jordan Peterson's the 12 rules for life.
the first 12 rules.
The first 12 rules.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I literally just finished it today.
Okay.
So I'm
That's
fresh
good.
on all this stuff.
Did you know?
Okay.
Well, there's a whole second book you can dive into. There's another 12
I'm gonna
rules.
I'm gonna let that soak. I might revisit a few chapters.
I kind of think it's like did you listen or read?
I listen.
Okay,
Yeah.
I listened as well, and I think they're like lectures. They're like college lectures, and
Yeah.
I'll be driving and I'll think, oh no, I stopped paying attention for 2 minutes,
Yeah.
and I'm lost, and I
Yeah.
gotta back up and start again. And he's definitely a big influence in the like figuring out, like pointing to things with words and then discussing like what other concepts and words are attached to those presuppositions. So
Yeah, it's interesting how he also ties in like biblical stories.
absolutely,
Right? 'Cause
absolutely.
It almost helps you understand those biblical stories of Cain and Abel or the fall or whatever a little bit more because he's bringing a psychological approach to what that could potentially apply to your life.
yeah.
Which I don't know is he a religious man? I don't.
So this is a great question.
Yeah.
And I have my own theory on this, and I think I don't know if I even mentioned this before, but I think if you really pinned him down and tried to paint him into a corner, I think you would get an interesting answer. Because if you say like, what is God, Jordan? Then or is God real? Maybe is even better.
That's a more
question.
clear because if he said what is God, he would probably say it's absence of chaos or absence of order.
So you would ask, is God real? And he would dance around and say, well, you've got two really important definitions to make. One is real and one is God. And so now let's start talking about what you mean by both of those words. And then maybe if we ever resolve either of those, I can answer your question, which was, are these two things equated? So is God real means is one equal one? Or like, is this an equated thing? Are these two things equal by the word meaning is?
Yeah.
So and then you're just lost in semantics forever, because if you try to address what is reality and then you try to address what is God, you'll never ever come back to a circle. Like
Absolutely.
So I personally think it comes if you painted him into a corner and said, okay, you want to dance around all these questions. I'll make it really, really easy for you. Will you say that Jesus Christ came back to life? He was dead and then came back to life and was seen by hundreds of people as the Bible claims. Like that's a question that's like, let's pin your answer on something extremely specific then.
Yeah.
And then I think you would get some I don't know. And
It's interesting how he can dance around that, right?
because I think the answer is no. I think the answer is you do not believe what the Bible believes. You say things that are biblical, kind of, but then like the people in the Bible, the stories in the Bible do not believe what you think about the Bible.
Yeah.
So like you think the Bible tells you these sort of analytic or these sort of analogies and these sort of archetypical truths. That's not what Paul said.
Right.
Believes.
You're saying that's what he believes? That he doesn't believe that?
I say that Jordan believes a certain thing that he thinks Christianity is true because it's in this abstract sort of sense of truth.
Right.
And I'm over here saying, well, that's not what Christianity says that it believes. You think you see something very different.
Yeah, it's so easy to get lost, but yet at the same time kind of understand where he's coming from. So like the fall and being kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and then that's the same chapter he's talking about order and chaos. He kind of leads you towards this path of kind of applying the Bible, at least the Old Testament stories, as more of like along the lines of like Plato or Galileo, like taking a lot of these like artistic expressions and stories of Greek mythology.
And a lot of the conclusions are about self-actualization, about you becoming a person and setting purpose in your life and going to do things and then establishing for yourself what you think are values and ethics and like these foundational things. What
are your thoughts on his the first 12 rules? Did you feel like so you're gonna ask, we're gonna lead this conversation about like what important things you should put into vows and how important they are, or what kind of meaning is given to them, right? Let's say, so if you're gonna have to write on one piece of paper like these vows, and they're gonna give tremendous amount of meaning towards this person you're going to spend the rest of your life with. Well, it's like, then you got to really pick and choose the most important things. Do you feel like Jordan did that? Do you feel like when the rules of like, stand up straight with your shoulders?
This is a good question. So like, in a way, and I'll say it another way, in the way I thought of like expressing my vows to an audience is like trying to give them a 2-minute trailer of a 2-hour movie. Mm-hmm. It's like, there's a ton of things I want to say and could say about my wife and my fiance at the time, and the ways I want to express to people what I think about her, what she's done for me, and why I'm standing here. And I don't have time for any of that. Mm-hmm. You guys are watching me. I've got like 2 minutes, 3 minutes. So I've got to pick and choose the absolute things that I think could maybe get you there the fastest, or at least just admit that I can't do it and say, I'm going to tell you one thing and just remember that. And so I think in the book, you're kind of like saying the same thing, whereas Jordan's thoughts on life might be an entire, in which he's got recorded, dozens and dozens and dozens of hours. It might take 100 hours to even kind of start to understand his whole picture, but he's going to, 30 hours of reading a book, he's going to try to break it down, get you the most important nugget. I think that's a good way of looking at it. And I think the rules that he chose are definitely a really good start. Yeah. Things that are sort of shoulds and oughts without kind of connecting to the old fashioned shoulds and oughts. Things like you talk about, stand up straight with your back, like
shoulders
project. Project yourself in a
don't be cowardly when it comes to
a brave way, I guess, in an organized way. And things like make a room in your house as
clean
ornate,
and tidy,
clean and tidy, but also as ornate. Appreciating things like cleanliness and art, and sort of moves into the second book. Is kind of, it has a feel that it's sort of a rebuttal to this like cancel culture or this rejection of authority and hierarchies of like, that's a hierarchy, so it's just naturally bad. Those are rules, so they're just naturally, we want to reject them. And where people are kind of moving to that and saying like, well, it doesn't matter if I really go out and make something of myself. What does it really matter if I'm in a relationship or not? Or like, it's all the same, and you can't really point to where one direction is better than another, so I'll just make none, or I'll just stay as a potential being. And I think the second book is a lot about like demonstrating why it's better to pick a direction, and like the fact of movement and direction and establishing purpose is better than resting in a place of, even if it is potential, even if you are a great potential person, but you're not doing something.
Yeah, one thing I recognized from his rules is it kind of painted a certain type of picture, and maybe a lot of these rules, the first rules, came from people who are in desperate need of psychiatric help, right?
So, or even just a kick in the pants to say, get off your couch.
Right. That's exactly I guess where I'm kind of going with. And so, but I one of the rules that really resonated with me, and we can dive in a little bit of this, because I was talking to Irina about this a few months ago. The person that I am today, and I think everybody would agree with this, but I feel like I'm echoing this even more towards myself. The person that I am today is a complete day and night person than when we first got married 10 years ago. And you could say that about everybody, right? You could say, well, I'm more patient. I'm now interested in this. That applies to everybody. But for me, my mental place has changed drastically in the last 10 years. And I 100% attribute that to the content that I'm consuming, like on the Joe Rogan's podcast, where you have Jocko Willink, you have the David Goggins, you have the Cameron Haynes, you have people who are doing extraordinary, difficult things and are signing up to do those difficult things. And then I caught myself, because that's the content I'm consuming, I found myself going towards that direction and doing difficult things because they're doing it. Like I started running. So running was like the first thing that kind of made me conquer my inner bitch, like Rogan would say. And so while I'm listening to these motivational people, while doing these difficult things, it started shaping my mind so much so that I don't recognize the me from, in fact, I don't recognize me from 5 years ago than I am to me today, because there's a huge change that happened. And so one of Jordan's rules, and I think it applies to so many people, that resonates with where my life is now, is consider yourself as somebody who you're responsible to take care of, right? So there's a lot of people who do things that are self-destructive, whether they eat crappy food, they drink too much alcohol, they're around negative people that gossip or slander or whatever. They're around people who they don't fit in with. They're constantly are, like one of his rules is, are constantly living in chaos, and there's no order at all. And so I think that part really reminded me that, consider yourself to be somebody that you're responsible to taking care of, to constantly evolve and better yourself, and compare yourself to who you are today. Compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not who you expected to be today. Like, that was one of the most powerful things I took away from that book.
Hey, thanks for watching our Next Door Neighbors podcast.
And be sure to capture the full episode anywhere podcasts are streamed, and including our YouTube channel, Next Door Neighbors.